This is Indonesia, one of the most breathtaking yet complicated countries on Earth. Here you'll find fiery volcanoes, dense jungles, and pristine beaches. It is a land like no other, home to more than 270 million people, scattered across over 17,000 islands. Yes, 17,000. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelago, stretching more than 5,000 kilometers across 3 time zones, from Sumatra in the west to Papua in the east. It is the 4th most populous country in the world, the largest Muslim-majority nation, and one of the most ethnically and linguistically diverse places on the planet. But behind this beauty lies a mystery. How did a nation spread over 17,000 islands even come into existence? Who ruled here before it was unified? How did so many different islands and peoples come together under one flag? And the biggest question of all, how can such a scattered land be governed at all? To answer this, we must step back in time, because Indonesia is not just a country, it is one of modern history's boldest experiments, an attempt to unite thousands of islands, cultures, and volcanoes as a single nation. By the end of this story, you'll understand how Indonesia has held itself together until today, and how, in the future, it might still risk breaking apart. Centuries ago, these islands were home to some of Asia's wealthiest and most powerful kingdoms. For thousands of years, communities here survived by farming the land and trading across the seas. Strategically placed between 2 great civilizations, India and China, these islands became a crossroads for merchants who brought not only gold and goods, but also ideas and religions that shaped local culture. As trade grew, powerful empires rose. One of the earliest was the Srivijaya kingdom in Sumatra. By the 7th century, it had become a dominant maritime power, controlling vital sea routes and collecting taxes from passing ships. Srivijaya was also a center of Buddhism, attracting scholars from across Asia. In the 13th and 14th centuries, another great power emerged, the Majapahit Empire in Java. It spread across many islands, flourishing through art, architecture, and effective governance. Hinduism thrived here, and at its height, Majapahit was the most influential empire in Southeast Asia. Yet, like all empires, it eventually weakened. Expanding trade, new rivals, and local conflicts eroded its strength. And then a new force arrived: Islam. By the 13th century, Islam began spreading through trade. Muslim merchants impressed locals with their conduct, and many communities gradually converted. But just as this transition was taking hold, another tide rolled in from across the seas. Foreign ships not here to trade, but to conquer. In the early 16th century, the Portuguese arrived. They spoke strange tongues, carried flags from a faraway world, and wielded weapons the islanders had never seen. They weren't after land, they were after spices. In Europe, cloves, nutmeg, and black pepper were as valuable as gold, and the Maluku Islands, part of Indonesia, had them in abundance. Soon, these islands earned a new name: the Spice Islands, and everyone wanted control. Not long after, the Dutch appeared. Unlike the Portuguese, they weren't content with trade alone. They wanted rule. In 1602, they founded the Dutch East India Company, the world's first great multinational corporation, with one mission: dominate the spice trade. They built forts, struck deals with local rulers, and when diplomacy failed, used brute force. Gradually, they pushed out the Portuguese and established control. Local kingdoms were either destroyed or forced into submission, but the Dutch wanted more than spices. They wanted land, labor, and resources. Thus began 300 years of colonial rule. They built the city of Batavia, today's Jakarta, as their capital. They expanded plantations of sugar, coffee, and tobacco, exploiting local farmers and imposing forced labor. Land was seized, heavy taxes were collected, and dissent was crushed with violence. Still, Indonesians did not abandon their dream of freedom. By the 1900s, the spark of independence had grown into a movement. The Dutch believed their grip was secure, but a storm was approaching: World War II. By the 1940s, Japan was expanding rapidly across Asia. In 1942, it invaded Indonesia, ending 3 centuries of Dutch rule. At first, Indonesians thought this might be a blessing. Japan promised to free Asia from European dominance. But the reality was harsh. Under Japanese control, life became brutal. People were forced into grueling labor, often with barely enough food to survive. Yet, ironically, the Japanese also trained Indonesians in military skills for their own war effort. skills that would later empower the fight for independence. Then, in 1945, the tide turned. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan surrendered. As Japanese forces withdrew, Indonesian leaders seized their moment. On August 17, 1945, just 2 days after Japan's surrender, Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta boldly declared independence. It was a historic step, but freedom was not yet secured. The Dutch refused to recognize it, determined to reclaim their colony. What followed was 4 years of bitter struggle, the Indonesian National Revolution. Through armed resistance, diplomacy, and sheer determination, Indonesians fought relentlessly for their future. They refused to live as slaves again. Finally, in 1949, under heavy international pressure, the Dutch admitted defeat, and Indonesia officially became independent. But independence was only the beginning. The far greater challenge lay ahead, governing a country of more than 17,000 islands, home to countless ethnic groups and dozens of languages. Freedom had been won, but now Indonesians had to figure out how to keep so many different people united under one nation. This wasn't a single stretch of land or a handful of provinces. Indonesia was a vast puzzle spread across 5,000 kilometers of ocean. Some islands were massive and densely populated. Java, for example, holds nearly half of Indonesia's population, around 140 million people, all on one island. Then there were other large islands like Sumatra, Sulawesi, and Kalimantan, each with its own unique cultures. Beyond these, thousands of smaller islands dotted the seas, each with its own traditions, language, and identity. To grasp Indonesia's diversity, consider this. More than 700 languages are spoken here, and over 1,300 ethnic groups call these islands home. People practice Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So how could leaders bind such different people together into one nation? Their solution was a powerful slogan, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. The idea was simple yet profound. We may be different, but we will remain one. The leaders also made a strategic decision about language. Instead of choosing Javanese, the most widely spoken tongue, they selected Bahasa Indonesia as the national language. It was simpler, easier to learn, and most importantly, neutral. This way, no single group felt favored over the others. Jakarta was chosen as the capital, and efforts began to build roads, schools, and sea routes to connect far-flung islands. Still, keeping the nation together was never easy. Some regions continued to resist. Aceh and Sumatra attempted to declare independence. Papua has long demanded separation. East Timor even fought a war and eventually broke away, becoming its own country in 2002. Indonesia has worked for decades to hold itself together, and while it has succeeded in many ways, the struggle for unity is far from over. Governing Indonesia is like steering a boat through a storm, with each vessel pulling in a different direction. It requires immense effort and patience. And the challenges are not just political, the geography itself is unforgiving. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone infamous for earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. That's why the country has over 130 active volcanoes, more than any other nation. Earthquakes are common, and tsunamis, floods, and landslides frequently follow. Some of history's deadliest natural disasters have struck here. In 1883, the eruption of Krakatoa was so powerful that its sound traveled nearly 4,800 kilometers. The explosion triggered a tsunami that killed 36,000 people and wiped out villages. In 2004, a massive 9.1 magnitude earthquake struck off Sumatra's coast, unleashing another tsunami that devastated Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and beyond, killing more than 200,000 people. It remains the deadliest disaster of modern times. Every year, floods and other calamities displace thousands of Indonesians. And then there is Jakarta. The capital city is slowly sinking. Excessive groundwater pumping combined with rising sea levels has caused parts of Jakarta to sink by as much as 25 centimeters. To address this crisis, the government decided to build a new capital, Nusantara, on Borneo Island. This project aims to ease Jakarta's burden, but carving a new city out of dense forests is no small task. It will cost billions of dollars and bring significant environmental challenges. Indonesia's nature is a double-edged sword. The same volcanoes that make the soil fertile can also erupt without warning. The seas that connect the islands can turn violent overnight. The warm monsoon rains that create lush forests can also flood entire villages. For Indonesians, living with natural disasters is not unusual. It is part of their identity. But geography creates other problems too. In most countries, highways and railways link cities easily. In Indonesia, the sea always stands in the way. You cannot build highways between provinces separated by ocean. Even within islands, infrastructure is difficult to build. Take Papua, for example. Its forests are dense and its mountains soar high. Some villages can only be reached by plane or by trekking for hours. Many areas still lack roads. On Java, by contrast, the population is so dense that traffic jams stretch for hours. Traveling just 100 kilometers can take an entire day. Communication is another obstacle. On many islands, internet and mobile networks are weak or non-existent. In some places, doctors visit villages only once a month, and schools run without electricity. Currently, about 73% of Indonesians have internet access, but nearly 70 million people still live offline. This has created a stark divide. Big cities like Jakarta, Surabaya, and Medan are well connected and modern, but smaller islands such as Nias, Flores, and Buru often feel forgotten. To close this gap, the government has invested billions in building ports, airports, highways, and expanding internet coverage. Yet, providing equal facilities across so many islands remains an overwhelming task. This is why governing Indonesia is considered so difficult. It's not only about politics, but also about geography. And beyond geography lies culture. Indonesia is a world in miniature, home to more than 1,300 ethnic groups. The Javanese make up 40% of the population, but there are also Sundanese, Madurese, Balinese, Batak, Dayak, Bugis, and many more, each with its own culture, cuisine, music, and language. Indonesia officially recognizes over 700 languages, more than almost any other country. In Sulawesi, for example, people may speak one language at home, another at the market, and a third at school. With such diversity, what binds them together? The answer is Bahasa Indonesia. Declared the national language in 1945, it was chosen because it was easy to learn and widely accepted. Today, it is spoken in every school, government office, and media outlet, becoming the glue that holds this nation together. Yet, language alone cannot erase divisions. In Papua, many people still feel separate from Indonesia. They look different, speak different languages, and often feel ignored by the central government. Separatist movements remain active there, sometimes sparking violence. In Aceh, people fought for years, and today the province enjoys special autonomy, even enforcing Sharia law. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, sectarian violence erupted between Christians and Muslims in Maluku and central Sulawesi. To prevent such conflicts from tearing the country apart, the Indonesian government promotes Pancasila, an ideology built on 5 principles, including belief in God, social justice, and unity. These principles are taught in every school and reinforced through every state institution. So, Indonesia is far more than just a country. It is a vast puzzle of 17,000 islands, a land of volcanoes and jungles of spices and colonial scars. From the temples of Bali to the mosques of Java, from Papua's forests to Sumatra's beaches, Indonesia is a riddle shaped by history, geography, and resilience. But the future brings new challenges. Cities are sinking. China's influence is expanding across nearby seas. Governing Indonesia has never been easy, and perhaps it was never meant to be. The nation's founders knew that holding together such a diverse geography and so many cultures would require more than politics. It would demand vision, resilience, and unity. And against all odds, they proved it could be done. That is why today, Indonesia stands as one of the most unique and fascinating countries in the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to share it. I'll see you again with another captivating topic. Take care and goodbye.